I'm an SSS-level Omega. Let's put it this way, I could take on 10 alphas by myself. My pheromones alone could knock out a whole crowd, but my fiancé seems to only like soft, sweet Omegas, so I act fragile and helpless, clinging to him every day, calling him husband, asking for kisses, hugs, and to be comforted before I can fall asleep, to stay close to him. I enrolled in the LA Military Academy. On the first day, during the placement test, I overheard some trash-talking alphas badmouthing my fiancé. I ripped into my mech suit on the spot and beat one of them until his nose was bruised and he couldn't even get up. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw my fiancé approaching, and I quickly dropped to the ground, legs weak, and said, "Husband, they're bullying me. Husband, hug me." Ugh, gross. Do these alphas not know how to control their pheromones? The smells were all mixed together, some even like pickled vegetables and rotten fish, making my temples throb. Everyone, tone down your pheromones. There's an Omega among the new students this year. Finally my nose got a break, but my ears got dirtier. They're really taking in Omegas this year? Ha ha ha. They're practically sending one over for us to enjoy. If I ever catch him, I'll. The rest was too vile to hear. It was from the alpha next to me, reeking of rotten fish. I lifted my eyes lazily to glance at him. I am the only Omega here. Noticing my stare, he turned to me with disgust. What are you looking at, weakling? I'm 6 feet 1 inch with long, slender arms and legs, fair-skinned, the top-tier Omega body, trained deliberately to make my fiancé swoon, and he dares say that. I was furious, and it would have serious consequences, but I held back. After all, I'm just a delicate, fragile Omega. I heard George is leading us this year. That's great, he's my idol. Then you must be blind. The rotten fish alpha sneered. You say that again. Say what? George is a deserter. The First Legion was wiped out except for him. He's the highest commander only because he stepped over his teammates' corpses to survive. Someone like him doesn't deserve to teach us. Smack! The whole exam hall went silent. Dozens of eyes were fixed on me. You actually hit me? He exploded and charged, but I punched him in the stomach. He collapsed to the ground, groaning. I coldly glared at him. A scumbag like him doesn't even deserve to talk about George. He got up, eyes full of hatred. As he raised his hand, a silver mech climbed from his wristband and completely enveloped him. I flexed my wrist, sprinted toward him, hooked my fingers onto his shoulder, and tore down. Crack! Snap! I ripped off the mech's arm and wristband with my bare hands. The mech vanished instantly, and a piece of flesh tore off his arm, blood dripping from his fingers onto the exam floor. A wave of rotten fish pheromones hit me. I raised an eyebrow. Oops. I went a little too hard. What are you doing? The examiner shouted, walking over. He didn't say anything when the alpha insulted the general, and didn't stop when the mech was activated, but now he's scolding me. I stretched my hand backward. He covered his nose and mouth. Warning, inducing an alpha's heat as an Omega is a serious crime. Stop immediately. Everyone stared as he backed away, covering his face. According to alpha rules, once an alpha goes into heat, they could kill everyone in the room and mate with an Omega. If that happened, this exam hall would turn into a nightmare. I peeled off my gland. Omega pheromones instantly spilled from the back of my neck, sweeping powerfully through every inch of exam hall 1. The alphas' faces drained of color. They fell to the floor one by one, eyes tightly shut, foaming at the mouth. Pfft, like I care if you go into heat, get poisoned instead. I bent down, grabbed a shattered piece of mech armor from the floor, aimed it at the exam hall's camera, and flicked it. The camera instantly exploded into dust. The alarm shrieked, ear-piercing. Footsteps sounded outside. Beep. The door opened. George entered with his aide. My body reacted faster than my brain. I staggered and was about to fall flat, but landed in a dry, warm embrace. I clutched George's neatly buttoned uniform, blinked, and a tear ran down my cheek. My voice trembled. Husband, they're bullying me. I'm so scared. I greedily absorbed George's pheromones, pressing my cheek against his neck. Too little. He's a disciplined, abstinent man, carrying the scent of a suppressant. So frustrating, I wanted to tear off his clothes, bite his gland, mark him, or be marked by him. I'm the Empire's only SSS-level Omega. I'm delicate, hard to manage, sickly, with underdeveloped glands. If my mental control falters, I could collapse. My pheromones are potent, even toxic, and my reproductive organs are defective. I can't bear children. There are more flaws, all of which I built into my public persona. All of it was to avoid an arranged marriage within the imperial family. I don't like anyone deciding my fate, so I deceived everyone. George, The general, he's the only one I want. I met George 5 years ago. As a child, my parents sent me to a backwater planet obsessed with tough love education. Before I turned 12, the only thing I did to survive was fight. I sparred with mechs, mutants, and wild beasts. In underground fighting rings, I battled desperately, just to stay alive. Fortunately, I had strong mental power and never lost a match. The owner earned a fortune off me, and at least treated me fairly. When I turned 12, I differentiated. I became an Omega. The backwater planet got no sunlight. One day, after a grueling fight, I was ambushed. Those attackers were vicious, clearly trying to kill me. Normally I could handle them, but I had just undergone differentiation. Pain radiated through my body. My veins throbbed, the back of my neck burned, and my legs wouldn't obey. They knocked me to the ground with a punch, kicking up dust. The black dirt clung to my body, the stench following me everywhere. My pale, sensitive skin scraped against the ground. Pain made me shiver. I bit my lip to stop myself from crying out, and I smelled a faint fragrance rising from my neck. I didn't expect to differentiate into an Omega. The attackers were even more excited. He's an Omega. Boys, our trip wasn't wasted. Let's have some fun before he dies. This kid fights hard, got some real strength. I've never faced anyone like him. Overwhelming, chaotic alpha pheromones hit me. My underdeveloped neck gland felt like it was tearing. With a rip, they tore my clothes, fingers tracing my back. I felt sick. Better to die than this. I reached for my neck gland. If I removed it mid-differentiation, my mental control would collapse. I'd go berserk, take them all down, then die. Not a bad deal. Bang! A gunshot rang out, and the world went quiet. Every one of those attackers was caught. I was gently lifted and held. I turned my head. He was in full uniform, handsome, radiating mature strength. He touched my forehead with concern. Hold on, I'll take you to the infirmary. George, he was a beam of light, breaking through the darkness of my world. He contacted my family. I hadn't even realized I still had one. They were wealthy. I was urgently summoned home, standing in the living room, judged from all sides. My father frowned. How did you become an Omega? Worthless. From then on, I was confined at home, trained from scratch in Omega etiquette and protocol, prepared to marry into a wealthy family or the royal line. No one cared what I'd endured over the past 12 years, only whether I was impressive enough now, whether I could climb the ranks of the elite. I quietly built my own strength. On the day Henry arrived, I happened to be at his side. Taking blows meant for him. I ended up hospitalized. My injuries were severe, half of my gland was damaged, and my mental power shattered. My family couldn't offer me to the royal family anymore, so in a show of gratitude, they arranged me as George's fiancé. Perfect. I lifted my head, staring at George's prominent Adam's apple, my voice trembling. Husband, my gland hurts so much. My whole body shivered, cold sweat streaming down, as if enduring unbearable pain. George lifted me into his arms, his voice deep and commanding to his aide. You stay here to handle things. I'll take him to the medical bay. The infirmary smelled faintly of disinfectant. I lay on the bed, hooked up to and for, clutching George's sleeve, my eyes red and glistening as I looked at him. My gaze made him flinch slightly, though it stirred a protective instinct in him. I knew I looked at my most vulnerable, and most appealing, when I did this. Years of practice in front of the mirror had honed this effect. It hurts, I whispered, a small sob escaping. Where does it hurt? He asked. I buried my head in the pillow. My gland, it hurts. He hesitated, then said, let me see, lifting the collar of my shirt. The warmth of his touch made me shiver uncontrollably. I gripped his arm, clutching the fabric of his uniform until it wrinkled. Because of my previous injury, I was allergic to the standard suppressants on the market. Even the pheromone blocking patches I used were custom-made. Husband, it feels so uncomfortable, I whimpered pitifully. I seemed unable to hold back my tears any longer. Can you give me a little of your pheromones? Just a little. His eyes darkened, and the air began to hum with alpha pheromones. SSS-level pheromones are almost abstract, impossible to smell directly, but I could feel it, like my gland was soaking in warm water. Every cell in my body seemed to scream with relief. I wanted more. The urge inside me flared uncontrollably, wanting to be fully enveloped by his scent, but I held on tight instead. George, I'm here to deliver the surveillance footage from exam hall 1. Cough, cough, cough. I suddenly coughed violently, grabbing George's hand, curling up in pain, struggling to breathe. The alpha scent intensified instantly, pressing toward me. George helped me sit up, guiding my breathing. Water, cough, cough. I'll get it for you. Lie down. I nodded obediently, but the moment he stepped out, my expression changed. I glared coldly at the person who had brought the footage. He froze, clearly seeing the content of the video, a hint of fear in his eyes. Yet, when he had seen George earlier, his awe had been obvious. You saw it, right? He insulted George. Do you think George is a deserter? No. His face panicked as he quickly shook his head. No way. He's a hero of the Empire. I'm George's fiancé. I couldn't let it slide, so I taught him a lesson. He got a minor injury. Do you think I was in the right? He swallowed nervously. Yes. If he talks like that about George, and even the Empire's exam supervisors do nothing, wouldn't that dishearten the general? Do you think he still needs to see the surveillance video? No. I nodded, scrutinizing him. After a moment, he found an excuse and left. I breathed a sigh of relief. Henry had said his brother liked soft, sweet Omegas. I had hidden myself well all along. I couldn't let a single surveillance video expose me. When George returned with the water, he glanced toward the door, then focused on me first. He carefully assessed my condition. How are you feeling now? Thank you, husband. Much better. He paused, then said calmly, Jacob, at school, you should address me as general, or teacher. Okay, general husband, I said sweetly. George's ears flushed quickly, but his face remained calm. I observed silently. This old man clearly liked this. I wondered what would happen later, if I kept calling him that in private. The thought made my pulse quicken. What happened in the exam hall? George asked. I shook my head. I'm not sure. They started arguing suddenly. The alpha pheromones were everywhere, and I could barely breathe. Someone even said horrible things. George's expression darkened immediately. He stroked my head gently. Don't think about it anymore. Rest well. I held his hand tightly and closed my eyes. Alpha pheromones enveloped me gently, and I drifted into a comfortable sleep. When I woke again, George sat at the edge of the bed, focused on his light brain device. I moved slightly, and he looked up. Hungry? I nodded and whimpered playfully, Husband, I want to go for a walk. Okay. George had never denied my requests. Henry had said he genuinely liked me, but I still felt nervous. The me he saw wasn't the real me. George was like mist in my hands, intangible, unreachable, and unreal, but that didn't stop me from moving forward for our relationship. I got into classes smoothly, but in the orange hallways lit by the sunset, I would secretly tug on George's sleeve, looking pitiful. General husband, my gland hurts. Can you give me just a little of your pheromones? The illness was something I had invented myself. When it acted up, it made me sweat, my face pale, and my legs too weak to stand. It was easy to trigger, just a shallow application of pheromones to the gland. The first time I didn't control it well. It was overwhelming, but after practicing in front of the mirror a few times, I got the timing right. The remedy was just as simple. When my pheromones were chaotic, George's scent, through hand-holding, hugs, kisses, or marking, would restore balance. No matter how you looked at it, I came out ahead. But this abstinent old man could only comfort me with hugs. His clothes always smelled of blockers, and I often wanted to tear them off. In an empty classroom, curled up in his arms, the discomfort sometimes made me act on impulse. I'd lift my head to nuzzle his lips. Each time, he would turn slightly to avoid it, his Adam's apple moving as he swallowed. I didn't know if he truly liked me, but I enjoyed these secret, thrilling moments. A month later, the troublesome alpha was discharged and also entered Class A. Each time he saw me, he walked around me. I was so absorbed in my after-class games with George that I barely noticed anyone else, but I hadn't expected him to still want revenge. Truly, overestimating himself. The afternoon I received the challenge letter, I was annoyed. George had left school on business. The old man's pheromones couldn't be faked today, but at least someone came to challenge me. In a narrow alley near the military academy, dozens of alphas surrounded me, leering and mocking. Jacob, don't rely on your toxic pheromones if you've got the guts. I glanced coldly at them. Each one was over 6'4", their presence commanding, not ordinary alphas, but undercover military personnel. This troublesome alpha came from a capable family, but I hadn't noticed it yet. One by one, fists flew with wind-like speed, blood splattered on my clothes, the scent triggering my nerves. My eyes reddened, my whole body shivering with exhilaration. In my mind, I praised the chaotic spectacle. It was a wild, violent celebration. When they all collapsed with cries of defeat, I stretched and shook the blood from my hands, curling my lips in a small, satisfied smile. A bunch of trash. Not even one of you could defeat an Omega. I turned, and saw George standing at the alley's entrance, staring for who knows how long. My mind went blank. I was about to collapse as if weak, but stopped. Pretending to be hurt felt wrong. Blood was everywhere. Those alphas were screaming in agony. Pretending to be pitiful was inappropriate too. They were worse off. So I ran. Fast. Jumped over walls. And somehow, George saw it. This was bad. I hid under the covers. Panicked. Missing class without permission. I didn't know how to face George. He must be angry. After all, I had deceived him for so long. I was frustrated, unable to focus. My mind was blank. I replayed George's figure over and over, frame by frame, trying to recall his expression that night, but it was too dark to see clearly. My fingers tapped on the light brain device, and I opened Henry's chat window. What do I do after tricking George? Henry replied quickly, but I stared at his words, disbelief written on my face. How could it be possible? He answered, just give him a kiss. I didn't know what gave him that idea. George barely ever gave a kiss. An old man with no sense of romance. If he didn't care, fine, but I panicked, feeling a flurry of anxious, uncomfortable emotions. I had always kept up the act, yet somehow it had been exposed. George must hate me. It was frustrating. My ideal self and George's ideal type were so far apart. I wasn't soft, cute, or compliant. He had no reason to like me. The light brain chimed. Has the heat cycle started? Record it now. I closed my eyes, feeling defeated. I had planned to trick George during this cycle, but now I was the one in trouble. If I couldn't be marked, he might even cancel our engagement. I opened George's chat window, editing my words, wanting to apologize or explain, but in the end, I sent only, let's break up. It was partly in anger, I admit it. I was annoyed at myself. I couldn't seduce George. I looked obedient and handsome, yet he didn't seem to appreciate it. I threw on black clothes, a hood, and went out to buy Omega suppressants. Regular suppressants didn't work well for me. I bought 10 at once. On my way home, I passed George's private villa. I hesitated, came back, lingered at the gate for a long time, then gritted my teeth, pocketed the suppressants, and scaled the wall. After all, I'd been teasing him for so long. Borrowing one of his coats wasn't too much. As soon as I got up, I came face to face with someone. Startled, I kicked instinctively. It blinked, looking puzzled. Young master, are you hurt? Why not use the door? It was George's robot butler, Xiao Guai. I ignored it and went straight to George's bedroom. I opened his wardrobe, sniffed each piece, and finally chose a coat with the strongest pheromone scent. Hugging it, I slipped out of the bedroom. Xiao Guai followed persistently. Young master, what should we have for dinner? I can prepare it. I ignored him, clutching the coat as I scaled the wall. Xiao Guai scratched its head and returned to the living room. Heat cycles are difficult for every Omega. I was no exception. My body burned unusually, and my gland at the back of my neck swelled like a ripe cherry. I panted, clutching the coat, inhaling its scent desperately. It wasn't enough. My craving for George's pheromones far exceeded anything I imagined. I buried myself in his coat, discomfort making my eyes red and hands tremble. I couldn't even hold the suppressants properly, let alone inject them. I opened them and took them orally. It was bitter, making my face scrunch in pain. There was still too little pheromone on the coat. My body grew hotter. I opened his coat, curled inside as if he were holding me, but the discomfort was almost unbearable. This heat cycle would take a while to recover from. Suddenly, the door opened. I blinked through the foggy air, seeing only a tall, blurred silhouette. It seemed, George. Impossible. Was it a hallucination? He hesitated briefly, then stepped forward and lifted me into his arms. I pressed against his neck, the familiar alpha presence washing over me. My body softened, relief flooding in, but my eyes stung. Tears flowed uncontrollably. George seemed to sigh and whispered by my ear, "Don't cry, Jacob." I still felt wronged. Why couldn't I grow into the person George liked? Tears streaming, I reached for his lips, just as mine were about to touch his. He blocked me with his hand. Through my tear-filled eyes, I saw confusion on his face. He whispered an apology, then applied a mild, temporary mark to the back of my neck, biting gently. It was the temporary mark I had longed for. When I woke up, I was in a private hospital. Henry, wearing a white coat, stood by the bed watching me. My first instinct was to look for George, but he wasn't there. I lowered my eyes and touched the back of my neck. My gland was swollen, marked with a tooth imprint. My brother went to the doctor's office. Henry said, looking at me, "Little sister-in-law, what did you lie to him about? Was it serious enough to need sacrifice?" And no, it's just the heat cycle. I could feel George's temporary mark, but nothing else had happened. I pouted. He really didn't like me. Not surprising, we were far from each other's ideal types. You really went too far, drinking the suppressants, and so many of them. I should be okay, right? I said weakly. No problem. He smiled. Just a stomach wash. Little sister-in-law. You're not afraid, right? I turned pale. Afraid? Of course I was. I hated the feeling of my stomach rebelling. When I was a kid, punches to the stomach during training made me vomit everywhere. I'd hated that sensation ever since. Stop scaring him. George came over and glanced at Henry. Henry smirked and winked at me as he left, muttering, "Really? A wife like this? Someone must cherish her." I was embarrassed beyond words, unsure how to face George. My past misdeeds made me fear he hated me. George returned with some test results, placing them in the bedside cabinet. "The doctor says it's nothing serious. Once the fever subsides, you can leave." I nodded. "Okay, thank you." George paused with his hand on the drawer, then set it down calmly and sat beside me. "About yesterday's temporary mark," I hurriedly interrupted. "I know, you only did it to help me, nothing else." The more I spoke, the quieter my voice became, fingers gripping the sheet tightly. George didn't like me, and I couldn't make him uncomfortable. After a long pause, he said, he started. I interrupted again. "Let's just stay brothers." He looked at me silently, his expression unreadable, deep. I was too afraid he'd hate me, so I forced a smile. "I'm sorry for lying before. I'm not obedient, not the type you like. As for our engagement, I deceived you first, so it's void. Please don't hate me." "I won't hate you," George said, "and thanks for helping with Henry." It was Henry's graduation trip. Their family was full of geniuses. 20-year-old Henry had already graduated from the Imperial Medical Academy. He'd gotten into trouble with some people, and when I arrived, the situation was intense. To prevent leaving a bad impression on George and avoid royal entanglements, I had to protect him physically. I forced a bitter smile. George had never liked me. Even if I deceived him, he wouldn't hate me, just because I saved Henry. Not hate, frustrating. I sighed inwardly. George suddenly touched my forehead. He stood up. "The fever's down. I'll handle your discharge." "I took that coat. Don't forget your classes. Since you got in, take it seriously." I lowered my head and whispered, "Okay." Going to school wasn't bad. At least I could see George. Even standing there doing nothing was a pleasure to watch. Mecha studies were dull and tedious, but George would show us his machines. His mecha, Dark Star, was silver gray and undefeated, practically a god of the Empire. Every time it appeared, the whole room erupted in cheers. I was no exception. I liked George not only because he saved me and was gentle and mature, but because he was strong, so strong the entire Empire relied on him. I admired strength and wanted to be the strongest man in the Empire. After breaking up with George, I had no excuse to linger near him. Every sight of him made my heart itch. That troublesome alpha had been expelled, and most classmates avoided me, but a few reckless ones still tried to provoke me. On the desk, there were daily heart-shaped meals. Even during team exercises, he always gravitated toward me. I didn't like his mint-scented alpha pheromones, but I didn't hate them either. There were team assignments, no need to push anyone away. His blatant favoritism was obvious. Even George noticed. Eyes always on us. George was usually calm and composed. Student romances didn't concern him, but he cared. Did that mean he actually cared about me? One night after school, I hurried around a stairwell corner and bumped into George. The pink envelope in my hand fell at his feet. He froze, picked it up, and asked, "What's this?" My face flushed instantly. I snatched the letter back. George frowned. "Students should prioritize their studies." I blinked. "But I'm an adult now." I left immediately. A few steps down, urgent footsteps approached. Suddenly, a strong arm wrapped around my waist. A broad chest pressed to my back. I felt his heartbeat thumping through the thin fabric. I couldn't help but smile slightly. George steadied me. "You're still young. An Omega. Don't be so forward." I looked at him, tiptoed, and kissed his lips. He shivered, eyes dark and intense. His large hands gripped my waist, deepening the kiss. I trembled in his embrace, breathing hard. He sighed beside me, silent for a long time, as if finally accepting the kiss from his student. Once accepted, there was no mental burden. He cupped my chin, held my waist, and lowered his head to kiss me, gentle but commanding. I licked his tongue slightly, his breathing intensified. Panting, I pulled back and looked at him with sparkling eyes. "George, you kissed me, you're responsible, right? You won't regret it." He didn't answer. He held my head, kissed my forehead reverently and tenderly. My hands shook with excitement. A predator letting prey go? That rarely happens. This time, I wasn't letting go, no matter what. 8. Dating my teacher was tense and thrilling. After school, I cornered him in the office, draping my arms over his shoulders and pressing a kiss to his lips. He held my head gently with his fingers. There are people. No one's here. I've checked, I said, capturing his lips again. I wanted him to feel my intensity, but every time, his kiss left me breathless. His kisses were gentle yet commanding, sweeping through every corner of my mouth. I gripped his clothes, legs trembling. We were in the rooftop classroom's medical room, with his Mecca that I'd been admiring for a long time. Kisses and embraces filled those moments. We savored the thrill of our romance. When the old man got jealous, he was terrifying. I'd only spoken briefly to another alpha, and he'd already left a mark on me, making his presence felt from the inside out. I secretly messaged Henry, "Is your brother always like this?" He chuckled, "Don't ask me, ask him." Henry was mischievous as always. That night, George pressed me gently beneath him. He kissed my lips, his heavy breathing in my ear, voice hoarse. "Jacob, I worry because you're young, and you'd lie about me." His broad hand brushed my gland, sending shivers through me. "You tell me, how do you want me to care for you?" That night, I felt completely exposed, yet strangely safe. The old man had his quirks. He always cared about my age. I was 18. He was 32. He said even kissing me felt like he was taking advantage of me, let alone marking or bonding. Honestly, this ancient relic of a man was mine now. If I teased him about his age, he might actually break inside. 9. When the imperial family requested battle again, George refused, citing our recent marriage. In retaliation, they kidnapped me to force him to fight. George gave in, but the family repeated their tactics. Just as he was about to defeat the insectoid forces, they cut off his energy supply and communications. They were forced to land on the scrap planet. This time was different. Last time, everyone but George had died. This time, he had prepared, saving everyone. The imperial family feared the elite of the noble houses. If they dared act like this, it wasn't surprising that the nobles seemed disloyal. They had reason to protect their own. Coordinating with allies, killing a prince for me was effortless. I used pheromones to incapacitate him, striking precisely at his heart. Henry had nearly died in a previous scheme. Another act by the imperial family. They had injected drugs into the king's glands. He had gone mad. When I went to retrieve George on the scrap planet, his eyes red, he pulled me close, and we shared a fierce kiss. Even I, reckless and fearless, blushed in front of everyone. The skies on the scrap planet were always dim, with no light to see, but George himself was radiant. Their battle scattered the insectoids, leaving them unable to recover for 10 years, buying time for internal empire politics. 3 years later, my 1-year-old son became the adopted child of the deranged king, naturally ascending as the empire's new ruler. Omegas had too few rights, so I established new regulations. Omegas forced into heat while under duress meant the responsible alpha could face imprisonment. Alphas releasing pheromones in public in a way that disrupted safety or transport could be detained. The Imperial Academy no longer admitted students based on gender. Any alpha, beta, or omega with excellent grades could study the Empire's core technologies. Omegas could request divorce, and removing marks was affordable, with minimal side effects. The people flourished. Everything moved toward a better future. 10. George and I had cleared every obstacle in the Empire. Once our son ascended, George and I finally had some peace. We spent our days playing childish games. The fierceness of my teasing matched the intensity of his reactions. He couldn't get too worked up, or he'd end up exhausted. George side story. My fiancé was fragile and beautiful, always looking like a delicate little rabbit whenever he acted shy or asked for my attention. I liked little rabbits, especially when his eyes were red and he sought my presence. I loved those moments the most. He was truly adorable and comforting. Because of past injuries, I had been assigned as a mentor at the Imperial Academy. He, an Omega, had managed to enter the top A-class school, a feat that required incredible effort. I didn't dare pry too deeply, afraid that my already fragile heart would lose control. Still, I was moved and grateful to him. That period was the darkest time of my life. In a single night, all my comrades had died. Every piece of evidence pointed toward the imperial ruler, our king. I was furious but powerless, only able to follow orders as a mentor. In the gray of my life, he was the only light. He had always been physically weak, his pheromones occasionally unstable, his glands often in pain. I knew it was the aftermath of saving my brother, and I felt especially protective of him. Despite being younger than Henry at the time, He had charged forward with courage I could hardly comprehend. Clearly, he was a timid little rabbit, yet he risked everything. His family insisted he become my fiancé. I wasn't sure if he truly wanted it, but he began calling me husband. My heart stirred, yet I dared not agree. I was 18, unsure if his feelings were fleeting, and I didn't want to hold him back from someone he might truly love. Omegas had almost no rights in the empire, and a marked Omega, temporary or otherwise, had even fewer. I had calculated everything, except that he would be such a fierce little rabbit. The day I tracked him to the alley, I was shocked. I thought he was in trouble, but instead, I saw him standing proud amidst chaos, covered in blood, eyes fierce. He spotted me and ran, vaulting over the walls, leaving a trail of defeated alphas behind. I recognized a few colleagues among them, gave brief reprimands, and sent them off for punishment. Back at the academy, I was distracted and restless. He had lied to me, but he didn't need to. Why did he? There was only one reason. He liked me enough to restrain his nature just to please me. I was happy, until I suddenly received his message. Let's break up. In that instant, my heart dropped to the depths. The feeling of being misled was unbearable. Perhaps he really was only playing. I slumped back into my office, only to receive a video from the little housekeeper. My little rabbit was holding my coat and running off. Stealing clothing, this was entirely within his capabilities. Finally, I had a reason to see him. When I opened the door, I could never have imagined the scene. My little rabbit was wrapped in my coat, face flushed, eyes misty, looking at me. I nearly lost control of my breath, my heart trembling. I thought, even if he was only playing, I would accept it. But when he woke, he called me brother and insisted we just be close friends. I respected his wishes, unsure of what to say, simply encouraging him to study well. Yet it seemed he had fallen for someone, and my heart felt tightly squeezed, everything uncomfortable. That night, seeing him like that, I wanted to hide him away just for myself. He bumped into me, his love letter falling to the ground, claiming he was an adult. I became jealous and desperate, chasing after him and pulling him into my arms. He remained soft, just as before, a little rabbit who still belonged to me. In that moment, every cell in my body screamed possession, yet I restrained myself. Then, unexpectedly, he kissed me. It was like fireworks exploding in my mind. This time, I would never let go. First come, first serve. Since I came first, he could only be mine. No one else could take him.